Hi, this is Roy Furr, and we're speaking today with Brian Kurtz, Executive VP of Boardroom Inc., about the upcoming Titans of Direct Response event being held this September 11th through the 13th in the capital of direct response marketing and home of Boardroom Inc.'s world headquarters, Stamford, Connecticut. Now, before we get started with Brian, here's a quick rundown in case you don't know much about this event yet. The Titans of Direct Response was put together as a tribute event, a celebration of the late Marty Edelston's life and contribution to the direct response marketing community. Because of Marty and his impact on our world, a lineup of true titans has agreed to come out, in some cases out of retirement, to join us. Quick list here: Dan Kennedy, Gary Bensavinga, Greg Rinker, Jay Abraham, Ken McCarthy, Perry Marshall, Joe Sugarman, Fred Katonah, Eric Betchel, David Deutsch, Arthur Johnson, Paris Lampropoulos, Michael Fishman, Jim Quick, and Ryan Lee, and, of course, Brian Kurtz himself. And all have agreed to share the most valuable insights, proven principles, and effective direct response strategies today, not just for creating winning campaigns and promotions, but for building an incredibly fruitful direct response business. Now, there are a few events that qualify as truly once in a lifetime, and this is going to be one of them. And at the end of this call, we'll direct you to where you can learn more about the event itself. However, today I've asked Brian to set aside an hour to discuss one big lesson he's gotten from each of the Titans who will be speaking in September, to not only give you a clear reason why you want to see each at the event, but also to give you immediate value you can take away and apply to your business and your life today. It's going to be a tight fit, so let's dive in. First, Brian, welcome.
Oh, thanks. And I'm not going to talk too much because I always talk too much. So I want to get right to the content here. But yes, I'm so excited about this event.
Awesome. Well, let's save the time for talking too much to talking about the Titans. So we'll take it from the top. First, Dan Kennedy. He's agreed to be one of your headliners for the event. I want to know what one major lesson you've learned from Dan.
You know, I wanted to, you'd think I would talk about something about creative or copywriting or all the marketing wizardry that Dan Kennedy is known for. I'm going to go in a different direction for this call. It's the power of transparency, living authentically. And he's a guy that protects his privacy. He's a man that never makes apologies about it being about the money. In that money is the way we keep score. Money's the only true thing. But he's a great guy. People think he's this, I don't know if they would call him a curmudgeon or not if they don't know him, but he protects his privacy. He understands the spirit of the entrepreneur, and he's incredibly open, transparent, willing to always say the truth. And to me, that's going to be one of the interesting angles on this event, that it's not just going to be direct response tricks, and I don't even use the word ninja anymore. We'll call them samurai things that the speakers are known for. But it's also about entrepreneurship and building a business. And Dan is incredible on that. He's not just a technique guy. He's not just a granular nuts and bolts guy. So I'm going to go with the one for him for this call, the power of transparency and living authentically. And he's going to speak about that. I'm pretty sure he wants to be teaching that to the next generation of direct response marketers.
Well, it's one thing, for him in particular, whether you like him or not, but he knows who he is, he recognizes it, and he makes no bones about it. He's clear about it, and I think there's a tendency to want to go in every direction to please clients, but he doesn't do that. He pleases himself and is clear about it.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And just a quickie, I think we're going to certainly talk about direct mail. This new medium called direct mail, and because Marty was big with direct mail as I am. We've mailed in the billions, and Dan is such a huge fan of what we've done in direct mail. I know that in certainly the first session of the day, when Dan and I have the stage, we're going to definitely do something about this new medium called direct mail and why it's so important and why it fits in with everything that everybody's doing today.
Excellent. Well, next, the man that you've gone on record and called the world's best copywriter, the one and only Gary Bensavinga. Now, what a treat that he's agreed to speak. Let's hear your lesson from Gary.
Yeah, there's so many with him. And the beauty of Gary is that he's so competitive that once he decided to speak and come out of retirement to do this, he said, Brian, my speech is going to be the best one, which is actually indicative of what my biggest lesson from Gary Bensavinga is, which it's never settled for anything but the best. And the example I always like to give, and I blogged about this a couple of weeks ago, is that Gary wouldn't wait for his mailing packages to get beat by another A-plus copywriter. When he got a control, the control was his enemy. And even his own best package, he went out and tried to beat it himself immediately. So that just gives you a sense. I think in my blog I said, Gary is probably the nicest man that ever lived. He really is. I love the guy. He's like my uncle, besides being a mentor, besides being a friend. But he is a tenacious competitor. And if you want to be a good copywriter, or you want to be a good marketer, make sure you hire the right copywriters. But I want a copywriter who is so hungry. That's why I hired you, Roy, to do this letter.
Yeah.
I want hungry. I want tenacious. I want prowling predators as my copywriters. And Gary, it's so ironic because he's so mild-mannered and such a sweet man. But boy, he will tear you up. You try to beat his control, he would tear you apart. So anyway, that tenaciousness is such a big part of who he is, and of course his talent is just so incredible. The Bensavenga 100 itself, he knew he couldn't top that event, and that's why he went into retirement and said he would never speak again. Because if he hit the pinnacle, why beat it? So that was like one of the few times where I think he didn't give up. He just said, I'm done. And the fact that he's coming out here is just unbelievable.
It really is. And for anybody that knows his reputation as basically taking a vow of silence, it's kind of a shock to the community that he is willing to come out. But it also speaks to his relationship with Marty.
Yes. Yeah, he and Marty had an incredibly special relationship, which I'm sure he's going to talk about. I told this to a few people, so I'll just say it now quickly. When Gary came to me, I wanted to actually use an interview, which we are using as one of the giveaways. It's an interview that you said, Roy, was one of the best things in your entire collection, which is
Absolutely.
An interview that Ken McCarthy did with Gary, and we're giving that away to everybody. It's not readily available, and we're giving that away as one of the giveaways for the event. And before I could even ask him if I could use the interview, he actually approached me and said, I want to speak. And it's because of how he feels about Marty, how he feels about me, how he feels about Boardroom. And I literally was crying. I mean, I was looking right at him. I was in tears. This means so much to me. And I will tell you that, while I thought, I think everybody here is a huge draw as far as all of these speakers, there's a core group of my tribe in the creative and copywriting world where I do believe that Gary's the biggest draw. And I can assure you that Gary is not coming there to just give you something that he's given everybody before. He's coming up with something unique to speak about, and I am so excited about it. He's being as tenacious about the copy for his presentation for Titans as he was about beating his control for Boardroom that had already mailed millions of names. So it's the same mentality, and that's what I love about Gary Bensavenga.
Well, you read those bullets, and it feels just so, I told him I was Twitter-pated after reading those bullets that he wrote.
And I know you're too humble, but Gary was commenting on your copy for this event, and having Gary Bensavenga tell Roy Furr, thumbs up on that. That was a big day for you. It was a big day for me too, because I'm a fan of yours as well.
It was. Well, let's keep moving. I know we could spend all day on any of these guys.
Right.
So a friend of Dan Kennedy's who almost never agrees to speak at any seminar or event is Greg Rinker from Guthrie Rinker. So let's talk to what big lesson you've learned from Greg himself and from watching Guthrie Rinker.
Yeah, so when I was visiting with Dan and we're talking about what speakers we would want to get, and of course Dan, as you would imagine, always aims very, very high. And he said, look, we have to talk about direct response television. And if there's only, the big kahuna in DRTV is Guthrie Rinker. They almost invented the medium. I mean, when Tony Robbins was going through the roof in the late 80s, that was Guthrie Rinker, as is Proactive, as is so many other brands. I think they're close to a $2 billion business. I'm not sure. But anyway, so Dan, never does anything small. He said, it's got to be Greg Rinker. And I said, can we get Greg Rinker to come? And so Dan went right for it. And I said, if Greg comes, the lesson that I've learned watching Guthrie Rinker all these years, remember, we were in the infomercial business for about 3 or 4 years, and we did over $300 million on TV. So we were good for a short period of time. The fact that he's been able to do it in a medium that's so difficult for so long, that alone is why I'd want him. But the bigger thing is about this whole multi-channel thing. This multi-channel thing is going to catch on. And I think anybody who's sitting in one medium and thinks that Greg Rinker is just a DRTV guy is crazy. Go try to buy Proactive on TV, great, but go to your local mall and find a kiosk for it. That's because of Guthy Rinker and the power of bringing all the media together, and that includes space, it includes telemarketing, it includes package inserts, it includes direct mail, in addition to TV being the big kahuna for Guthy Rinker. So for Greg, what I want to learn more from Greg is that, being the biggest and best in one medium is not a reason to rest on your laurels, that you always have to think in multiple channels, and you also don't want to put your eggs in one basket. I mean, it's crazy. And that's why Dan and I are going to talk a lot about direct mail too, because I'm not saying do direct mail only, do email only, do TV only, but all of these things work together. And I didn't think there's anybody in the world that could talk about that better than Greg Rinker.
Absolutely. It's my understanding in the infomercial business now, and I don't have a lot of direct experience, but it's almost impossible to even be in the infomercial business, the DRTV business, profitably if that's all you're doing. That the only real way to be profitable at this point is to be using DRTV to drive retail sales and to drive continuity sales and renewal sales, and to be building a list of customers who you can go back to. And
I think that's right.
Yeah, just like we learned in direct mail, it's you're acquiring customers at break even or worse because you know the lifetime value of the customer. And that actually,
I had an epiphany this past week. I was at an event, and someone was talking about a Facebook funnel and the idea of offering a $10 special report on Facebook. And there are very few online marketers who are not experienced would say, I'm not going to do that. I'll never make my money back. But if you looked at the back-end funnel that was created, and that the average person who bought the $10 report was worth $78 per buyer once they put all the back-end in place, you start thinking about, wow, I could buy a lot of Facebook advertising if I have a $78 average per new buyer, as opposed to just thinking about it as a $10 buyer. And TV is expensive to do that, but look, Dean Graziosi has been able to do it for years with a lead generator as a $9.95 book. So you're absolutely right. And Greg, I think, can talk to all of that. I really believe he can. And he is coming with his senior VP of Seth Radwell. And so we'll get into some nitty-gritty here. I mean, Greg's going to have the 30,000-foot view, and he built the thing. But I think we'll also get some real inside, as Dan Kennedy likes to say, inside baseball on Guthy Rinker.
Absolutely. Now, this actually segues perfectly, that whole discussion of lifetime value, to the $9.4 billion man, the next person on our list, Jay Abraham. So tell me about the lessons that you've gotten from Jay.
It's the 30,000 foot again on Jay for me, and Jay's been a mentor for me. He's been a friend of mine since the 1980s. I've admired him. He's been just a true hero for me. And I think it's the title of one of his books, Get Everything You Can Out of Everything You've Got. And I may have misquoted that a little bit, but you get I didn't have the exact title off the top of my head, but it's close. I'm close. And basically, Jay, always taught me that, you have a big list. Brian, you understand the list business. You understand database marketing. You understand that everybody on your list is doing a lot more things than buying subscriptions to Bottom Line and buying health books. And so now Jay could take that to an extreme depending on your business, that if someone's going to buy umbrellas on the boardroom list, that I should sell them umbrellas as well. And, that becomes then, business philosophy. And these are the kinds of things I'm going to ask Jay in our interview. How far do you go? How do you make that fit with business philosophies? But if you don't take a look and really assess your assets as a direct marketer and make sure that you get everything you can out of everything you've got, you're not just leaving money on the table, you're leaving your mission on the table. Your mission in your business needs to be fulfilled on a variety of levels. And again, going back to Greg Rinker, being in one medium is not the way to go. With Jay, it's really about business building. It really is about business building. It's not about just the offer. It's not about just the sales letter, although those things are important. Jay is a wonderful copywriter. And Jay has some other amazing things, which I'm not mentioning now, in terms of his stable of just incredible knowledge and experience and the things that he teaches. And obviously, he charges incredible amount of money for consulting services, both nationally and internationally. So, but that's my big thing on Jay. Get everything you can out of everything you got.
Well, absolutely. And I think that it also, just to dig a little bit deeper, it opens up tons of possibility. I mean, when I know when I work with a client and we build out a sales funnel, and all of a sudden that $10 Facebook acquisition becomes worth $79 or $799 or whatever. It just opens up so much brand new potential to reach new lists and new markets. But it really does start with that thinking. And Jay has certainly been the pioneer and one of the biggest proponents of that thinking.
I was going to say, he sort of almost invented that kind of thinking. It's just so short-sighted to think that, as John Carlton would say, a promotion is not a business, or or a product is not a business, which my friend Chris Farrell says. It's really about looking at the whole picture, and Jay is just such a big picture guy.
Absolutely. And then we have the original bridge between the Internet and direct marketing, somebody who planted that flag long before it was popular, Ken McCarthy. So what lesson do we get from Ken McCarthy today?
And Ken is another one like Gary who has not been out, and people think, out of sight, out of mind, what could he be doing that could be meaningful anymore, that type of thing, which is just the opposite. Ken McCarthy, I think my line was, I think you used it in the letter, which was, if Al Gore invented the Internet, Ken McCarthy invented Al Gore. But Ken McCarthy was a true pioneer in Internet marketing, and yet he was a student of Gene Schwartz. He was a student of all the greats of direct marketing before he realized that the Internet was sort of the ultimate direct marketing medium. He was one of the first people that was really understanding that this was going to be an amazing direct marketing medium, this Internet thing, which will catch on. And so Ken, tongue-in-cheek. So Ken, he's doing a lot of new stuff, and people don't even realize it. He's connecting with all kinds of folks in the online world, and it's funny, Ken, his only big requirement to me to not that he wouldn't speak is he wanted to know who all the other speakers were, because he doesn't want to be thrown into just an IM world that a lot of it he doesn't believe in. He doesn't believe in some of the stuff that's being done, believes in the stuff that's good. And so, he's the pioneer who never stops pioneering, and I think you and I had the line, he's still crafting his craft, so to speak. So he's reinvented himself a few times since. So the beauty of Ken, with Jay, I want to do it as an interview because I want to kind of pull out all the stuff, and I want to make sure that we get to it in the hour that we have with Jay Abraham. With Ken, I want him to just go up there and come up with some original presentation because he's not spoken in a long time, and what can he do to kind of move the needle for people based on that heritage, like where he came from, originally before the Internet, what he did to pioneer on the Internet, and now, he had these system seminars, which was the seminar for, way back, and for all the folks in any kind of direct response marketing. And now what is he doing currently? I want Ken to talk about how he looks at the current state of direct response marketing and any media. That doesn't have to be online or offline. It has to be anything. So Real universal. He true pioneer, never stopped pioneering, always crafting his craft.
Perfect. And then there's Perry Marshall, who I joined with you last year in Stamford, Connecticut, at your one-day invitation-only workshop, which is what these events were prior to this year, one person all day. And tell me about the lessons that Perry is teaching you now with that seminar and even today after that seminar.
So Perry and I have become really good friends, and only in the last couple of years, but I've admired him for so many years because, he's what I want to be when I grow up. He he is. People think he's the Google AdWords guy. Perry Marshall is so much more than the Google AdWords guy. Perry, like Ken, has studied all of the great copywriters. He's always sending me notes. Do you have Gordon Grossman's book, by the way? Do you have Dick Benson's book, by the way? I mean, he's looking at people that, and Perry's a bit younger than me, not a lot, but he's younger than me. He's younger and smarter than me. And Perry, so when I was looking to do a one-day workshop with someone that I thought was like the new wave of just at the highest end of everything to do with direct response marketing, his name just kept coming up and coming up. And I just was bold enough to call him and say, let's do this. And so I think the lesson, and this is a lot based on spending that full-day workshop with him last year, was, and this is a really important concept, that you can be your own best copywriter for your product. Now, I will say that my passion for this Titans event, I did try to write a sales letter, which our buddy David Deutsch said, Brian, go get a copywriter. Which was a nice way of saying, Brian, your copy sucked. But that's why I hired you, Roy. But I think I knew that I could put the passion into my product better than anybody in the world. And if I had a little bit more skill in some of the direct response things that I've been teaching all these years, and I had spent more time on it, I probably could have come up with something. You came up with something better because you took what I gave you and then just built on it. And people were surprised how well that you were able to write in my voice because you used some of that stuff. And Perry has this thing called the Swiss Army knife, which really enables marketers and copywriters alike to really dissect, if you think about a Swiss Army knife with all the blades, and each blade is a different thing to think about. And when he went through that, it was like mind-blowing for everybody there. I don't know if he's not going to do exactly that at Titans, but the bigger thing is that you are your best copywriter for your own product was the lesson. And then a little bit, his new 80-20 sales and marketing book, where you're spending your time, how you're prioritizing, which ties into if you want to be the best copywriter for your product and how much time you want to spend on it. So Perry is absolutely, he's just got so many levels and the skill set is so deep that, but my lesson would be that from him.
Absolutely. And I actually I have that Swiss Army knife method book that he gave out last year right next to my desk right now. So it's. I think
he probably has to go into it a little bit, just for the people who weren't there last year.
Okay. Well, what about, let's keep moving forward. What about Joe Sugarman? I mean, he's a mail order legend. He's the man behind Blue Blocker sunglasses, which are known throughout the world, and all sorts of other successes.
Yeah, I think I said in my original sales letter, I don't know if you put it in the final one or not, that Joe Sugarman to me is like an agency in one brain. And I don't really like direct response agencies because I think you have to specialize. You need to buy your copy in one place, your media in another place, maybe even, and obviously split your media buying in different places, your production and printing in another place, obviously, and or whatever back end, on online marketing as well. And the thing about Sugarman is that I think there's no one that I've ever studied who was able to marry copy with offer and product better and to be able to think about the whole picture. He's sort of like a film director who's thinking about, while he's shooting the scene, how it's going to be edited, would be my analogy. And he understood lists. He understood copy at the deepest level. He wrote a lot of copy himself. And then put all on top of that, I don't know if he didn't invent A/B splits, I know that, but the testing methodology that he put into place and the discipline, when he tells his story about, running A/B split tests in the Southwest edition of the Wall Street Journal, one of his classic stories, for certain products to see which products he wanted to put in his JSNA catalog, which, by the way, was a precursor to the old Sharper Image catalogs and then all the tech catalogs that came after. He was a pioneer in that market as well. Forget just blue blockers. So understanding, marrying copy with offer and product, getting the right list, and then a great testing methodology will make you a legend. And that's why Joe Sugarman's a legend, because he did end up, starting to buy things on the outside. I think when I do the interview with him, I want him to talk about that. How much did he do by himself versus how much do you outsource and all of that. But he's got great perspective on all of that. And yet early on, when he was starting out, I'm sure he didn't have the money to go buy a la carte for all of these things. So what did he do? He just prepared. He just was the hardest working guy on the hardest working guy on the planet to make sure that he understood all of these different elements of a direct response campaign. And then he was able to do multimedia too. It wasn't just direct mail. It wasn't just TV. It wasn't just space and print. It was everything. So again, I just think that I don't know of a brain that I've ever met. A brain that I've ever met. That's a good way to put it. But a brain that I've never been encountered with that understood the elements of what it takes to have a true direct response business than Joe Sugarman.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep moving forward. Fred Katonah, who a lot of people, admittedly, in kind of our world of direct response marketing, unless you've come up through Glazer Kennedy and Dan Kennedy, don't know that name. But he's also a friend of Dan's, and he's probably the top name in direct response radio, and he'll be there at the Titans event as well. So let me know what let us all know what you've learned from Fred.
Yeah, so, I'm sitting with Dan Kennedy, and we're mapping out the event, and Dan just looks at me and he goes, we got to have radio. None of these other speakers are probably going to have any expertise in radio, and radio is this, I'll tell you, that the Glazer Kennedy group and Dan in particular know that this is a secret weapon. So, we looked at each other. I said, Dan, who's the number one guy in the world in radio, direct response radio? And it's Fred Katonah. So I started looking at his stuff, and of all the speakers, I have to admit, he's not, I said almost every speaker except for Fred is either a mentor or a friend or a close friend or both. Fred is going to be a friend for life, obviously, in the planning of this event and after this event, but he's the one I know the least, so I have to admit that. Yeah. So that's the transparency here. On the other side, I've done some radio. I've had limited success with it. I think ignoring this medium is ignore at your peril. And I think what Fred, the lesson I've learned so far in looking at his stuff and listening to some of his stuff, and we're giving away an amazing $500 value giveaway at the event, a CD of like just his greatest secrets of direct response radio. But I think it's about segmentation and endorsement opportunities. That just like cable TV kind of fragmented the market and gave you incredible segmentation capabilities, radio and the way Fred teaches it gives you so many opportunities for segmentation and endorsement opportunities because of all the different stations that are available and demographics that are available and interest areas. So I'm probably as excited as everybody else to hear Fred because I'll learn a ton from him. But I've already learned a lot in planning this event and looking through his stuff. So that would be the big one: segmentation and endorsement opportunities.
What a lot of people don't realize is that in the direct response world, even something like online financial newsletter publishing, some of the biggest successes in recent years have had tremendous radio budgets. And unless you hear that on radio, unless you hear the ads that are driving you to the online promotions in radio, you don't even realize that stuff is going on. And there's not really the same record of it as there is with a lot of other types of advertising. And so I'm absolutely fascinated because I think that there are huge untapped opportunities in radio. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the one other thing too is that that when Fred's finished in the context, and he's going to be later in day two, like after Greg Rinker, and I think it's going to be a nice cap to all the other things that have gone on before. Jay Abraham and Joe Sugarman are going to be more of a 30,000-foot view. Gary, I think, is going to be a little bit more granular on the copy, although I think he's going to go pretty broad too. But again, when you get to Fred, and it's a very specific area, I think how then it ties into everything that's gone on in the event previous, in the day and a half before Fred goes on stage. I thought the order that was very important here to put Fred in a spot where we put radio as another cherry, one of many cherries on top, so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to Boardroom's current Mount Rushmore of copywriters. These are the top 4 copywriters at Boardroom today who've collectively been responsible for more than 620 million pieces of profitable direct mail since '95. I love that stat that you forwarded to me.
Yeah.
So let's dive in one by one. First, Eric Betchel.
Yeah, so quickly on the Mount Rushmore, I love the Mount Rushmore concept because it really gets you to focus. It's like I got to come up with my top four. I'll come up with my top four, and these top four are just the obvious top four current since 1995 for Boardroom. And when I conceived of this event, the first thing I said, if I can get Dan Kennedy as the first guest, and again one of many, the only one that I wanted everybody who's on this list. They were all in my mind, but the first thing I thought of is I want to do this panel. I want to do the Mount Rushmore of Boardroom's copywriters, since everybody admires our copy, everybody has stolen our copy, everybody has tried to imitate our copy, and everybody who's hired these writers know how powerful they are. So Eric Betchel is probably the least known of the four, and the irony is, of the four, and too bad for Paris, Arthur, and David, who we'll talk about in a minute, but Eric has the most pieces in the mail of that $628 million of the four. And how did he get there? Because he basically has that Gary, and the other ones have this too, but to a large degree what I've learned from Eric is that he has that Gary Bencivenga mentality of, I'm not going to wait around for someone else to beat me. I'm going to beat myself. And he had the in our case particularly, he had the foresight to take on our Bottom Line yearbook package, which is it's an annual, and you have to have the discipline. Think about writing for an annual product that comes out every year and coming up with new angles and new things, but you're kind of beating yourself every year. And he's had the control for our Bottom Line yearbook, which is one of our best-selling products, for many, many years. So the discipline that it takes to stay on a product. So I would say it's about discipline. I mean, they're all four of these writers are always late with their copy. Don't let me kid you. But Eric has got the discipline and the tenacity of a Gary Bencivenga in that respect. And then just a little thing, he's got a great sense of alliteration. I remember one of his great packages for us was the 12 or 7 smiling swindlers. We're always about Marty being the bloodhound or the watchdog, consumer watchdog, and Eric knows how to capture that concept. He writes paranoia as if it was like poetry. I think that's what I learned from Eric. He writes paranoia like it's poetry. So I just thought of that right now. That was pretty good.
That's good alliteration there.
Yeah, there you go.
No, I love that. I love that though. Okay. How about David Deutsch?
David Deutsch is the thing I've learned from him, again, besides the discipline, besides that, David agonizes over every word, everything.
Yes.
And he pays attention like a fly on what, to make sure that order card is perfect, that every word is chosen properly. I mean, and he's always late with his copy. And I know why. Because it's not that he's afraid to hand it in, it's that he wants it to be just the best it can be. So with him, it's like every word matters. And then a big thing with David is that, and the good writers always do this, but he's really, really good at this, that he checks his ego at the door during the editing process. In other words, he lets the client or whoever tell him, and he sends his stuff to a lot of other writers when he's writing it, wants the feedback, but then he really knows when to call the question. Like he really knows when to die on a sword for a particular copy approach, for a particular thing that he really believes in. And I've got to tell you right now, when David Deutsch, after going through a painful and long editing process, tells me that, Brian, you're wrong, Marty, you're wrong, that we have to do it this way, we end up doing it his way. Maybe we'll test another version against it, but I know because I can trust him. I can trust that when he is absolutely convinced that he'll die on a sword for a copy platform or an approach, that it's the right one. And he's had some incredible control packages for us, just incredible. And as you know, the third day of Titans is a workshop which is already sold out. We have a waiting list, and David and I are going to run that. So it's sort of like me, the direct marketing guy, and David, the copywriter, and we're going to do all hot seats for the whole day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I couldn't think of a better person to partner with on that than David, because he's gonna, if you bring a promotion to if the folks there bring a promotion to that hot seat, David is going to be they're going to walk out with a better promotion. I just know it.
Absolutely. I have my own story that just really quickly about David during the Titans process that kind of signifies some of what you're talking about. So I sent my copy around to you, and you sent it to Dan Kennedy and Gary Bensvenga, and David had been involved throughout during the CRIT process. And he was the only person that came back and said, what did I do differently, either better or worse than Kennedy and Bensvenga during that CRIT process, that I can use to learn how to do my crits better next time. And so I thought that was really fascinating that he came back around and we had a nice little side discussion about that, just how he could do that one little element of what he does in his days or weeks or months as a copywriter better. And so it's kind of a sense of constant improvement. And I think that shows up in Every Word Matters and all sorts of areas.
And I think that you have a lot of that in you too, Roy. You know, you having worked with you on this project, and I think it just bodes well. I mean, you got to have a big ego as a writer. You got to have a lot of confidence, but that don't confuse ego with stubbornness. Don't confuse ego with not always trying to improve.
Yeah, it's ego versus kind of self-actualized self. There's a big difference there.
Exactly.
But let's keep going with Arthur Johnson. Now, a lot of folks may not know him as a copywriter, but may have seen him on TV with Hugh Downs a few years back, and I think that speaks to what you want to talk about.
Yeah, so Arthur doesn't get out much. I mean, Arthur is, you know, like Eric Betchel, you know, doesn't speak much. You know, unlike David Deutsch, he doesn't have copy cubs working under him and things like that. Arthur might be, you know, and go ask David Deutsch and go ask Paris Ampropoulos, who we'll talk about in a second. Go ask a lot of the copywriters, and they'll tell you that, you know, sometimes they look at an Arthur Johnson package and their response is, I'm not going against that. I'm talking about some of the best writers. And Paris will be the first to admit. Paris told me once he would not go against an Arthur package when he saw it. I can't beat that. So this is one of the best writers in the world. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, he was on our Hugh Downs show. So one of the lessons I learned from Arthur is that in the Hugh Downs infomercials, where Hugh was interviewing Arthur, and we were going through all the doctors that are in our book and those people, and Arthur's going to talk about the Treasury of Health Secrets phenomenon for Boardroom that we created together with Hugh Downs, with Marty, with everybody, and Steve Dworman, who is the producer. But anyway, so Arthur, when we put Arthur's face on the screen for the first time, we write down Arthur Johnson, health writer and editor. And those people in the industry go, what's that? That's Arthur Johnson, the copywriter. No, Arthur Johnson is a health writer and an editor, because we positioned him that for hundreds of millions of people and to hundreds of millions that led to hundreds of millions in DRTV sales. And we positioned him legitimately that way because of how he attacks content and research. When I get sick personally, or I know some stuff, him in particular and also Paris, I go to them for health advice because I know that they have dug in to every doctor's study. When they see a study that looks like it's going to make for great copy, they dig in some more to see what the level is. So talk about, you know, copywriter. If you think copywriting is easy and you think copywriting you don't have to do research and don't have to dig into your subject matter, think again. And so Arthur Johnson, to me, what I've learned from him is that however hard you're working to dig into your subject matter, you're not working hard enough. Now, I learned that from Gene Schwartz, too. And I'm not a copywriter, but I kind of took that work ethic, hopefully, and put it into other areas of my life. I probably should have put it into copywriting. I think I'd be a lot wealthier. But I think that I really believe that Arthur has this something that says, I'm not stopping until I get to the truth. And he is a health writer and editor who just happens to be one of the best copywriters in the world. Those two things don't happen by accident.
Perfect. Well, let's talk about Paris Ampropoulos next.
Yeah, so Paris and I mean, very, very close friend. Some people think we're brothers from a different mother. You know, I got that Jewish Mediterranean look, and he has that Greek Mediterranean look. And the funny story is that we were at the Systems Seminar, the last one with Ken McCarthy, and I gave out free books to everybody, and I left the event, and people came up to him the next day and thanking him for the book. And Paris said, "You're very welcome," as opposed to say it was from Brian. But that's a different discussion that Paris and I had to have. Seriously, Paris is one of my closest friends and one of the best copywriters in the world. And the lesson I learned from Paris, and I'll use a quote to illustrate it: "Don't leave your best material on the editing room floor." And that's advice for editors and copywriters. So on the editor side, or on the information gathering side, when you're writing stuff as an editor and you want to be edgy and you want to get to something that's really hot and tight, make sure that the stuff that you think, oh, this is going to be too risky or this is going to be too edgy, think again. Get more proof. Get more stuff to back it up, because that material could be the best stuff for promotion, right? And it's also the stuff
Absolutely.
that people haven't heard before, which makes it the best editorial information as well. And then for a copywriter to subscribe to this is also critical. Look, Paris knocked me off my chair once. He was doing a package for our alternative health newsletter, and he actually used a quote like this. He goes, I was talking to your guru, Doc, and he told me all the articles that didn't make it to the newsletter, and that would make for the best package I could do. So I said to him, why don't you send all of those articles that didn't make it through the editing process and have the editors look again? Because if we can get some of that stuff through without being irresponsible, I'm not saying, do something that's irresponsible, do something that's not true. That's not where I'm going here. But Paris will push the envelope, literally, pun intended, to make sure that if you've got something edgier than you're comfortable with, and you can use that legitimately and with confidence, that could be your best stuff. So you have to always rethink and think that stuff. I mean, I learned a lot more from Paris than that, but that's like the big one that sticks in my head.
And the other thing that's worth noting there is the results of that approach is Paris has done what Eric did with the yearbook and what Gary did with Bottom Line Personal, and he has held the control for a number of years for Bottom Line Health and continued to beat himself over and over again.
Right, Bottom Line Personal. Yeah. I mean, those are like our flagship newsletter. Paris has had the control for the longest period of time that I can remember. So Paris Paris is also a great teacher. I mean, he's got, and I think a lot of them will be at the event, is what he calls his copy cubs, and he's got some of the best young writers learning at his feet. Similar to what Clayton Makepeace used to do, and David does it a little bit, Deutsch, but Paris has a whole network all over the world. He's got guys in Australia, all over the world. UK.
Yeah, I've talked to a bunch of them. I
think a lot of them are coming, and a lot of them are coming to the event. Awesome. And I said to Paris, they're coming to not hear you, of course, Paris, but he said, yeah, they're kind of sick of me already. But Paris is training the next generation of great copywriters, which it's admirable. I mean, he can be curmudgeon-y by his own admission, and he's tough. I mean, he'll kick you out of his group too if you're not good enough.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've also invited out your own personal $25 group mastermind of Titans who may not be as well known in kind of the traditional direct response world, but they are applying a similar level of direct response prowess in their own respective niches. So, I mean, that's Michael Fishman, Jim Quick, and Ryan Lee. So let's start with Michael.
Yeah.
What one lesson do we get from Michael?
Well, so Michael is sort of like, I mean, I don't have a brother, but if I had a brother, it's Michael Fishman. We've known each other since the early 1980s, so he's old like me. And he was a list broker back in the early 1980s, and he was the best list broker in the world. And he was responsible for putting millions and millions of names in the mail for us profitably. I mean, he got the names that took the packages from those great writers and made sure to find them. And he did that for Rodale Press, and he did that for Phillips Publishing, and he did it for many other major mailers. And that training and we both sort of came out of the list business, and I was a list manager, as you know, in my early days, my first 10 years. And so Michael understands audience better than anybody, and now he's taken that to the next level, where he's also studied the great copywriters. Gene Schwartz was one of his mentors, like mine, and he's friends with all the same copywriters I am. He's friends with all the people here. And I say with Michael, it's the power of language in all you do in marketing. And it's not just copy, it's language. I mean, Michael has become this sort of scientist of language and how you talk to an audience based on what you know about them, that you don't talk to your audience in one voice, that you have, and this comes from his list training, that your database is so many different audiences, and every one needs to be talked to in a different way. And he is just a samurai on this stuff. And so, we both kind of grown up to kind of new plateaus in our careers from just being in the list business. Yeah. But I always tell him, I'm more proud of my list heritage than he is. But if you pin him down, he'll say, yeah. I mean, being the best list broker in the world has certainly served me well. And now he's become this incredible guru of language.
It seems to be what he's learned out of that, and not just talking about lists as lists, but lists as markets with distinguishing characteristics, and how you speak to that based on what you can understand from all the information you can gather about the list and the offers that went to the list and built the list, and other offers that have worked to the list. So
exactly,
and then that high level of thinking can be applied over and over again elsewhere. How about Jim Quick? You actually shared an article where he worked with the cast of X-Men, of the new X-Men movie, and I was completely fascinated by that. So what big lesson have you learned from Jim?
It's really the power of purpose in all you do, marketing or otherwise. Jim is a great direct response marketer, but he's also probably the number one expert in accelerated learning and memory. He's got a company called Quick Learning. Obviously, he's got something else called Superhero U, YOU, where he teaches people about really embracing their superpowers. And that picture that I posted on Facebook of him with the cast of X-Men, with none other than Hugh Jackman with his arm around him. And it's not just Jim, running around like Zelig getting his picture taken with stars. He, not those folks in that picture, but he's coached Hollywood stars. He is coaching and working with CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world. I can't mention names because I don't have his permission. He is speaking on stages to the highest-ranking executives in Fortune 50 companies. Or certainly Fortune 100 and 200, but even Fortune 50, and basically teaching them about reading faster, accelerated learning, what it means to be able to get more done. And, here's this guy, what you think is somewhat unassuming. He doesn't go up there in a three-piece suit either, believe me. But Jim Quick is, I marvel at his superpowers. He could have been in the X-Men movie as a superhero. So anyway, but everything about what he does is about the power of purpose, making people better at what they do, making people live their life more fully. And he understands launches. I mean, he had a launch marketing business online for a while. I mean, it's not like he doesn't get the whole direct response thing. But you wouldn't think of him off the top of your head as a titan of direct response. He's just a titan. And he happens to use direct response in his Titan stuff.
we probably don't have time, nor could we tell it as well as he could. But his personal story is very much one of the learning strategies that he teaches being incredibly relevant. That purpose comes out of his personal experience, and I'm sure that he'll talk about it at the event. But his entire business is founded for a personal purpose as well as just being a business, and I think that that's really what you're speaking to, and hopefully he can dig into a lot more.
I'll make sure that he covers that, because that's a great story. His personal story of how he got here is just incredible, and it shows you the power of persistence and overcoming incredible odds. He's obviously one of my closest friends too. He's just an amazing human being.
Well, let's dig into Ryan Lee.
Also one of my closest friends. Also someone that the thing that fascinates me about Ryan is that at such a young age he's a mentor to a whole category. Like, he was started in the fitness category online. And I think you can't find one person he doesn't even do fitness stuff anymore, but anybody who did fitness stuff online that doesn't say Ryan Lee was the guy that they followed. And Ryan's young. I mean, Ryan is not an old man. So it's weird seeing a mentor who's not 70, right? So Ryan, and Ryan just blogged on, so I got to share this quickly. He did a blog this week. Tony Gwynn, the great baseball player, died last week. And
Yes.
Tony Gwynn was a hero of mine. And Ryan put 4 things forward, and I think I'll do this as the thing, because basically Ryan's big thing is the power that comes from not being like everybody else, calling out the imposters and the amateurs and being ethical in a sea of unethical practices. That's probably what I've learned most from Ryan. Let me give you quickly the 4 things he brought up, that the lessons from Tony Gwynn for your business.
Okay.
One is that it's okay to hit a lot of singles and not always hit a home run. Tony Gwynn had like a .338 career batting average, which is like almost as high as like the best players who've ever lived. And he was not a home run hitter. He was a singles hitter. He was always on base, basically. And being always on base might be better than hitting a home run once in a while. The second thing was longevity. I mean, he played for a long time. And I think longevity always will out in business. You want to have a business for the long haul and not just do short-term revenue events. We'll talk about that. His third thing on Tony Gwynn was loyalty. Tony Gwynn, in an era where everybody left their team and had no loyalty to their team, they would jump ship as soon as they got the biggest contract. And Tony Gwynn stayed in San Diego playing for the San Diego Padres his entire career. And I'm sure he took less money to do that. But he made a lot of money. It wasn't about the money. And, you think about it, the guy died at 54. So he lived his life to the fullest there. And the fourth thing was that without your health, you got nothing. So here he dies at 54, lamented the fact that he started chewing tobacco when he was in the early 80s, and I think that led to his salivary gland cancer. And so, the importance of, no matter how rich you are, no matter what you do in business, if it doesn't do you much good if you're sick or you're dead. And so, and Tony Gwynn lamented about that. So that's how Ryan thinks. He just put that out last week. I just thought that was just an incredible blog about, and he just, off the top of his head, sitting at Barnes & Noble, came up with that. And that's who I got in my life at the most intimate level. All I can say is, lucky me.
It's so funny because those are some lessons that I've learned and been thinking about recently that are so deep to business, and that's just how Ryan thinks.
Yeah.
Excellent, and that's so this wraps up all the Titans who are going to be there. We certainly haven't had enough time to cover all the lessons that we could have covered from each, and really. You could sit down, I'm sure, for a 1-hour call and talk about each of them, or each one could headline their own 3-day event, and many of them have. But for folks who are listening, if we've left you wanting more, here's what I want you to do right now. Go to titansofdirectresponse.com. That's all one word, all together, titansofdirectresponse.com. And there you can read all about the event and what each of the Titans will be speaking on. There's a lot more information there than we covered in this call, which had a different purpose. And you'll also learn how you can join us in September. And so one more time, that's titansofdirectresponse.com. Again, this is Roy Furr, and we've been getting all these wonderful lessons from Brian Kurtz of Boardroom. And Brian, thanks again for taking the time here to share all these wonderful lessons, and I look forward to joining you in Stamford in September.
Yeah, the best thing about this interview, Roy, is that we got it all in an hour, and even though we had big doubts because of the way that I get, I start getting diarrhea of the mouth. I've got stories up the wazoo, and actually this call has been useful for me because I'm starting to think about all the different areas I want to dive into deeper that we discussed even on this call, and I've got the right people to do it with. I mean, these people, as I said, they're all friends and mentors, and I'm just, I'm pretty pumped about the event, but I want the content to be just killer, as Joe Polish would say. It's got to be killer content. So, and I think this is a great start, and I thank you for allowing me to think about that lesson. This was your idea, to think about one major lesson from each of them, and it was a great way to start thinking about the depth of the content that we want to deliver at this event. Titansofdirectresponse.com, man. I think it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I hope people will be there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks, everybody, for listening in.